Most people think debt is about owing money, but the deeper issue is usually time, because every recurring payment reaches forward and claims part of income that has not arrived yet. At first, that does not feel dangerous. It feels normal. A payment here, a subscription there, a financing plan that fits the monthly budget. Nothing feels extreme, nothing feels reckless, but slowly, future income begins showing up already spoken for. And once enough of the future is already committed, financial life can start feeling trapped before anything actually breaks. That is the quiet power of future obligations. They do not always create panic immediately. They create dependency gradually, and dependency changes how life feels underneath the surface. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston, your synthetic financial educator. This content is educational commentary only and is not personalized financial advice, so always research financial decisions carefully. One of the most important financial concepts many adults are never taught is future commitment, because modern financial life is increasingly built around using future income to support present decisions. Monthly payments, installment plans, subscriptions, financing, automatic renewals, recurring obligations, all of them create a simple structure. Use something now, pay for it later, or continue paying for access over time. That structure can be useful, that needs to be said clearly. This is not an anti-debt discussion, and this is not an anti-financing discussion. Many people use financial tools responsibly. Some obligations are necessary. Some obligations solve real problems. Some improve quality of life. The deeper issue is not whether a financial tool exists. The deeper issue is what happens when too many future commitments stack together quietly. Because once enough future income becomes committed, flexibility begins narrowing underneath the surface. Not dramatically, gradually. And gradual changes are often the hardest to recognize while they are happening. At first, one payment feels manageable. Then another payment feels manageable. Then another subscription feels manageable. Then another monthly obligation feels small enough not to question. And individually, many of them genuinely are manageable. That is what makes the system powerful. Financial pressure rarely appears all at once. It usually develops through repeated commitments that feel reasonable in isolation. One decision does not feel heavy, but the structure created by many decisions can become heavy over time. Now, flexibility matters more than most people initially realize, because flexibility is not just financial, it is emotional. A flexible structure can absorb uncertainty more calmly. An unexpected expense feels less threatening. A temporary disruption feels less catastrophic. A life change feels more manageable. But a structure filled with future commitments behaves differently. A missed paycheck feels heavier. A car repair feels heavier. A medical bill feels heavier. Even small disruptions begin feeling larger than they used to. Not always because the events changed, but because the structure surrounding those events became less flexible. Now, another important layer here is timing. Future obligations change the emotional meaning of a paycheck. Instead of income arriving fully available, part of it arrives already assigned to payments, assigned to subscriptions, assigned to financing, assigned to obligations created earlier. And when income arrives already divided, the paycheck no longer feels like possibility. It feels like maintenance. That shift matters, because financial life begins feeling less like building direction and more like keeping the structure alive, maintaining the payments, maintaining the routine, maintaining access, maintaining continuity. And once continuity becomes the emotional priority, freedom starts feeling different, not impossible, but narrower. Now, this does not happen because people are irresponsible. Modern financial systems are designed around recurring participation. Recurring payments are predictable. Subscriptions are predictable. Installments are predictable. Automatic renewals are predictable. And predictable systems are stable systems. Again, this is not about conspiracy. It is about incentives. Systems naturally evolve toward repeatable behavior because repeatable behavior reduces uncertainty. But the same structure that creates predictability for the system can create pressure for the person inside it. Because every recurring obligation reduces optionality. A person with fewer future commitments has more room to adjust, more room to pause, more room to recover, more room to make decisions without pressure shaping every option. But once future commitments expand far enough, decisions begin happening inside tighter boundaries. Career decisions feel heavier. Unexpected expenses feel heavier. Risk feels heavier. Change feels heavier. Because the structure now requires continuous support. Now, another important factor here is emotional distance. Future costs usually feel less intense than present benefits. That is normal psychology. The immediate reward feels real. The future obligation feels abstract. A purchase today creates emotional satisfaction today. The payment later creates pressure later. And because the pressure is delayed, the decision often feels smaller in the present moment. That is one reason monthly framing is so powerful. A large cost feels different when it becomes a smaller monthly number. The emotional weight changes. The decision feels more manageable. The structure feels easier to accept. But the future still carries the commitment. Now this becomes especially important once future obligations become normalized. At first, a new payment feels noticeable. Then it becomes routine. Then it fades into the background. And once obligations become routine, people stop evaluating the full structure as clearly. The payment is just there. The renewal is just there. The subscription is just there. The financing is just part of life. And when enough obligations become invisible, the full weight of the structure becomes harder to see. That is where many people begin feeling financially pressured without fully understanding why. Nothing looks broken. Everything still functions. But the structure underneath daily life feels heavier than it used to. Now, another layer involves convenience. Modern systems make future commitments extremely easy to create. Stored payment methods, instant approvals, buy now, pay later options, subscription trials, automatic upgrades, low-friction checkout systems. Each one reduces the pause between desire and commitment, and pauses matter. Pauses create reflection. Reflection creates awareness. Without pauses, future obligations can accumulate faster than people emotionally process them. That does not mean people are weak. It means low-friction environments influence behavior. Human beings naturally adapt to systems that remove resistance, and modern financial systems are very good at removing resistance. Now, another important layer is lifestyle expectation. Because future obligations often support lifestyle expansion. A nicer phone, a newer vehicle, a better apartment, a subscription bundle, a convenience service, a financed upgrade. Individually, each one may feel reasonable, but over time, they can raise the baseline of what feels normal. And once the baseline rises, maintaining it becomes emotionally important. That is where future obligations become sticky. Because people are not only paying for objects or services, they are often paying to maintain a version of normal they have already adapted to. And reducing that structure later can feel uncomfortable, not impossible, but emotionally uncomfortable. Now, another factor here is comparison. Modern environments constantly display upgraded lifestyles, curated comfort, curated success, curated convenience, curated financial confidence, and repeated exposure quietly reshapes what people view as normal. Not because people consciously compare themselves every second, because human beings naturally adapt to surrounding environments. If upgraded living is constantly visible, upgraded living starts feeling more ordinary. And once it feels ordinary, future commitments can feel easier to justify. That is one reason invisible pressure can grow alongside visible progress. The lifestyle looks better. The structure feels heavier. Now, another important layer is attention. Future obligations require ongoing mental tracking. Due dates, balances, payments, renewals, interest, access, maintenance. Even when everything is current, the mind often carries the structure in the background. That background tracking consumes emotional bandwidth. And financial stress is not only mathematical, it is attentional. The more systems that require maintenance, the more mental space financial life can consume. Now this becomes especially exhausting when obligations rarely pause. The payments continue. The renewals continue. The structure continues. Even when energy drops, even when stress rises, even when life changes unexpectedly. That continuous nature creates pressure. Not necessarily crisis, pressure. And pressure changes behavior over time. People become more cautious, more reactive, more dependent on stable income, more sensitive to disruption, because the future has already been partially assigned. Now, none of this means future commitments are always harmful. That would be too simplistic. The point is understanding. A financial tool can be useful and still influence behavior. A payment can be manageable and still reduce flexibility. A subscription can be convenient and still add complexity. A financing plan can solve a present problem and still create a future obligation. Both things can be true at the same time. That balanced understanding is important because Winston is not here to create fear. The goal is clarity. Now, if you step back and observe the full structure, something important becomes visible. Future income becomes committed. Committed income reduces flexibility. Reduced flexibility increases dependence on continuity. Dependence on continuity increases emotional pressure, and emotional pressure changes decision-making. That is the system. Not one dramatic mistake, not one irresponsible moment. A structure built through repeated commitments over time. Small obligations, small renewals, small monthly payments, small commitments that gradually claim pieces of the future. And once those pieces accumulate, the future can start feeling smaller before it even arrives. Now, understanding this should not create guilt. Guilt rarely improves clarity. The goal is awareness. Because awareness changes how the system is seen. Instead of viewing every payment as an isolated event, people can begin seeing the larger structure those payments create together. Instead of viewing every monthly cost as separate, they can begin recognizing how recurring obligations shape flexibility collectively. Instead of viewing stress as random, they can begin noticing how much of the future has already been committed. That perspective matters, because many people were never taught to think about money through time. They were taught to think about payments. They were taught to think about affordability. They were taught to think about monthly numbers. But monthly numbers do not always reveal the full structure. Sometimes the more important question is not, can this payment fit? Sometimes the deeper question is, what does this commitment do to future flexibility? That is not financial advice, it is financial literacy. Because understanding the structure changes how modern money begins to look. Less like isolated purchases, more like a timeline of commitments. And once financial life becomes visible as a timeline, future income starts to feel different. Not just as money, but as flexibility, as breathing room, as optionality, as time that has not yet been assigned. That is the real insight. Freedom is not only about how much income enters the system, it is also about how much of the future remains flexible once the income arrives. And when people understand that distinction, financial pressure often becomes easier to interpret clearly, less emotionally, more structurally, more intentionally. Because future obligations become most powerful when people stop seeing how much of tomorrow has already been claimed by yesterday's decisions. And every lesson in this series is designed to make those hidden structures easier to see clearly. That concludes today's lesson. Peace. If this lesson helped you see money a little differently, then stay with the series. Because financial understanding is not built from one idea. It is built layer by layer. One system, one pattern, one hidden behavior at a time. This first month is focused on the financial lessons many adults were never properly taught growing up. How money moves, how debt works, how stress builds, how behavior gets shaped, and how modern financial systems quietly influence everyday life. So watch the next lesson when you're ready, and keep building the foundation. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston. Peace.